as of last time, or just like last time, my name is Shane, and this is Matt, CEO of Clarify, and this is Clarify Everything, episode 2. And this is a podcast where we talk about everything tech, AI, some business, really anything to do with startups in general.
Any random question that
And random questions and just about
into Shane's crazy mind or anybody else who's listening.
Yeah, really, exactly. So I feel like the biggest thing is we talked about it generally last week, but we really only dove deep on like deep learning and machine learning, those two different things. And I didn't know if since last week we talked about maybe wanting to go a little bit more in depth on that, if that was something you wanted to do here.
Well, we can dive in deeper, but I think that some of the more poignant things are what's happening in the space right now versus just how the technology works. We spend a lot of time talking about, what is AI? What is deep learning? What is machine learning? But I think, we get into the weeds of what that is, and it's pretty easy to get lost. And we can sum it up in a really kind of stupid way by saying it's just a lot of math. It's just a lot of math, just like
really advanced math.
Really advanced math, and that's cool. We want all the science and the achievements that we get from doing all of that. When it comes to understanding our bodies and understanding the universe and understanding science, but I think where artificial intelligence in general right now is going to really make an impact is how is that going to touch your life? How is that going to touch my life? How is that going to touch anybody's life? What's it actually going to do? What does deep learning do for you? What does deep learning do for me? Otherwise, it's cool, but it doesn't solve any problems. And then you can't put yourselves in even the same ballpark as the greats, the Einsteins and the Marie Curies and these people literally cured cancer or treated it in Marie Curie's sense, and understood the fundamental fabric of the universe in Einstein's sense. So right now we've just built a really cool app that, can walk your dog or maybe make fart sounds in your car, but it doesn't actually fundamentally change your life or improve what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. Like many of these things are just, they sound really cool, right?
Right.
They don't actually solve issues.
Right. And that's where I think we get, even the media cycle gets wrapped around the axle. Like, what is this going to do for me? Like what? And it sounds small when we put it like that, but we are humans. Everybody listening is human. Well, I mean, at this point, everybody's listening humans. I don't think we have any bots, but it's what is it going to do? Like, what does that actually do to make my life better? And then you want to understand how it's doing those things. But what is it actually going to do? And we hear all the hype cycle now about what's it doing, but honestly, what is it actually doing?
Yeah. So it was actually kind of interesting. I wanted to bring a couple things up. One is that something I've been seeing on like Twitter and Instagram is that the picture of like AI detecting breast cancer 5 years before it developed was posted and kind of went pretty viral. And people in the comments were saying, we need more AI solutions like this and not just another thing to do homework with.
Yeah.
And another segue is a lot of things are going around Twitter saying that now teachers are grading with AI.
Yeah.
And so if students are like doing homework with AI and teachers are grading with AI, what's even the point in like going to school? So I guess my like actual like question or topic I wanted to pick your brain on was what like larger solutions similar to like detecting breast cancer or these types of things do you see happening in the future, say 5 years out, not only with our company here and like what we do, but as well as some other people in the field?
So that's a really interesting question when you kind of break it out. Classically, futurists have been people that spend a lot of time looking at the past to try and intuit what the future is going to look like. And it's relatively easy to go pretty far, to go 20 years in the future. All of these cool things are going to happen. But to go 5 years in the future or 10 years in the future, that's more than just your magic 8 ball and a little bit of prognostication. So in this space, you have to drive the question of what is going to generate money versus what's going to generate benefit.
Right.
And is, solving your homework, you stumbled onto the dark internet theory without even realizing you were doing it. That most of the traffic that is moving around in the internet right now is just bots talking to other bots. So there's not actual real things happening. There's not
Yeah, it's
actual
like when the
people
Twitter purchase happened, they said that
Yeah.
like up to like 80% of their accounts were or not, maybe not AI, but like bot accounts, like fake
Well,
accounts.
yeah, and I mean, a bot is theoretically artificial intelligence. I mean,
Mm,
technically, it's artificial intelligence.
yeah.
It's acting on its own based on a given set of parameters,
Oh, okay.
which is our definition, or what the definition we should have for AI. And then we move into the eponymous AGI right now, which is an agent of some type that could act to solve a problem using multiple tools and multiple solutions, and act on its own to do that. And some of those definitions are being thrown around like they don't mean a whole lot. But ultimately, with the big players in the space, your foundational players, your OpenAI and your Anthropic and your Microsoft and your Google and even Amazon to a degree, even though they're partnered with Anthropic, those players are trying to do what they say and come up with a foundational model, some model that does a whole bunch of shit. But our brain doesn't work that way. Nature doesn't work that way. Nature makes razor blades. Nature is very, very precise in what it's trying to do. So doing big, broad things don't make sense. You come up with a hammer, versus actually a screwdriver or a socket wrench. Those broad scale solutions don't solve problems, but they distill down into things that do solve problems. And that's where I think we're going to see some really interesting things happen in the next 5 years. There are a large number of individuals out there who are working on, I don't want to say large, there is a decent number of individuals out there that are working on some really challenging problems that artificial intelligence can help with, deep learning and machine learning,
Right.
pattern matching. And the most notable of them are the three spaces where we have to figure shit out as the human race. Number one is energy. We need to figure out energy problems. I don't want to say solve, because that's something
Mhm.
that Sam Altman has thrown around quite a bit. And it's like, how do you say you're going to solve Spanish?
Yeah.
You have to learn about it, continually learn more.
Yeah.
You can't solve physics. You learn about it. But the energy that we're using for both these systems and then for ourselves is increasing
Right.
exponentially. So we need to figure out better ways to do that. The second space is in human capability, human performance, which can be translated into human longevity pretty easily. Oh, we want to live longer. But if you were in the body you had when you were 90 years old and you're decrepit and not able to do a whole lot, you live for another 100 years, that kind of suck.
Yeah.
So we need to have the performance aspect of it. And that's all the way down to the molecular level, the ability to treat disease in our own body and to enhance the things that we're doing. There's a lot of ethical concerns in that space. Are we going to build superheroes and supervillains and all of this other stuff, which is a legitimate thought problem that we need to look at and think about. And then the third space that we need to look at is, and I'm being very broad, is the environment. It's not whether you're talking about climate change or you're not, whether you agree or you disagree, the Earth's flat, whatever. I don't want to get into that shit. But it's where you exist
Mhm.
needs to be worked with or changed, modified in a way that you can actually exist in it. Whether that's your house, your living space, or the entire planet that you're existing on. These are gigantic problems that all have these little sub problems buried underneath them. To go back to your point about, can we detect cancer early? That
Right.
is one space within that human performance space. So I think where we'll see some really big gains are in those three spaces. But those are not problems where you're going to see the unicorn,
Right.
solution happen in 3 years. You're going to see these little incremental changes that are going to add up over time. And the first of those is the ability to detect cancer sooner. The statistics actually show that if you can find cancer 2 years before we do right now, 90% of the fatal cancer cases that we've looked at are treatable
Oh,
if
wow.
we could find them 2 years ahead of where they're being discovered
Just
currently,
through conventional methods?
just what we have now,
Wow.
like just the treatments we have now. It If you actually look at the basis of chemotherapy and radiation therapy in cancer, it's almost 100% effective. The
Wow.
problem is that the tumors grow faster, or they're too
Mhm.
prevalent, or there's too many of them, and that's
Well,
what
they've
ends.
already spread so far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you could find it sooner when the tumor was smaller, or there was only one, or there was other ways for it to be operable, you could effectively cure cancer. Because our treatments right now are incredibly effective. They just don't work when
Mhm.
there's a jillion tumors, or the tumor's the size
Right.
of your head. Then it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
that would be weird. So so finding it early detection is great. And then we pivot into early treatment, and we pivot
Right.
into different treatment methodologies. And that those the same thing applies to energy. What is the more efficient ways that and then you're starting to deal with molecular engineering and mechanical engineering and chemical engineering. What metamaterials, what standard
Mhm.
elements could we use to build better wires, or more transmissible materials that we can move electricity better, since our society is so dependent on electricity. And then the environment. All right, we're all aware that some changes are taking place in our environment now, whether or not you ascribe to the global warming / climate change, or that it's some country obscuring things or seeding clouds, wherever
Yeah.
you want to end up. If we can manipulate the environment that we live in, then we can extend human life, extend human performance, use more resources. So climate models are humongous. There's hundreds of trillions of parameters in those, and if we can build better energy and more compute, then we can use better models, and we can predict climate changes better, which will reduce the incidence of these things. And if you're on the crazy end of the spectrum and you think that certain parties are seeding clouds and creating hurricanes, you could then predict that using a more effective climate
Yeah.
model and stop it, which starts to sound an awful lot like something you would see in a Marvel movie.
Yeah. I think that's something that people don't realize, is that the way AI can affect most people, I think, especially with this cancer example, is actually through like the diffusion of effect. And so, like, say, like you and I both have had people in our lives affected by cancer, right? And
Right.
so, I think that the way AI can affect, just in this specific example, more people, is the fact that if less people are dying, less people are grieving, right? And so, if say 1%, I don't know what the statistic is, you'd probably know better than I do, but say 5% of the population gets cancer, then say 30 to 50% of the population are affected by cancer, or in some way their family or people they know. And in that way, if we can like essentially cure cancer through the use of AI detection, then we've in fact made everyone's life better, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that as a short-term goal in the next 5 to 10 years is a real tangible thing that we can achieve just to improve the lives of human beings across the planet, right?
And that's a really salient point, is that the impact, the old joke, the 6 degrees
Mhm.
of Kevin Bacon, like
Yeah, yeah.
everybody in Hollywood
6 degrees
knowing
of
what's
separation,
away
yeah.
from knowing Kevin Bacon. So
Yeah.
it's the diffusion of the impact associated with that. And then if you want to be really kind of tyrannical and dictatorial about it, it's those people who are experiencing mental distress or physical distress as a result of that are not productive members of society.
Mhm.
They're not able to go to work as much. They're not able to, because they're dealing with mental health challenges or physical health
Or just the
challenges.
emotional weight.
Exactly. So at that point, you have detracted from the global performance that we would
Right.
be doing to advance things further. And it's a very difficult argument to make, because then, you're talking about opportunity cost and, larger
Yeah.
scale, end curves and things like that. But the reality is, in your own microcosm of your life, when you're dealing with a person or multiple people that have suffered from cancer, and you could have caught that earlier, you could have seen it earlier, you could have treated it, you could have extended life, or reduced the psychological, physiological impact to the people that are around that by not creating as much suffering, then you've solved a problem that is theoretically unsolvable.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's
That's what we
hugely,
do.
yeah, that's what we do. That's how we operate. We're tackling the biggest things that are out there, simply because not a lot of people are.
Yeah.
It's not, they're not, it's scary. It's a big, ugly problem. And you don't make a ton of money when you do
Yeah.
that. You don't get to be $1 billion company overnight.
Mhm.
And that, not just for us, but there are a lot of companies out there that are trying to do the same thing. They want to bring knowledge, they want to bring understanding, they want to bring benefit. And it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And you don't see it right away because of that diffusion you were talking about. That you cure 10 people of cancer and you don't see the effect that spreads out. And we don't have to use the word cure, because cure is kind of an aggressive word. You
Yeah.
treat it effectively. You treat cancer effectively. You treat other diseases effectively.
Mhm.
And that, early detection is important, but then the conglomeration of data that makes a human There's tons of information about that, hundreds of millions of data points, whether it's chemical or physiological. Oh, I feel crappy today. Why?
Right.
Can you answer that? It's always a guess. Oh, well, it's because I went on a bender last night. It was out until 3 o'clock in the morning. I only slept for 2 hours. Yeah, that's gonna make you feel like shit. But what if it's longer term? What if it's other conditions? So treating those things is, at least in my mind, and in a lot of the people that work with us here, are focused on making those changes. Improving it incrementally, doing it one step at a time.
Yeah. And I think that even just with things that may not be quite as drastic as cancer, we've talked about, especially here at Clarify, that our product should be able to help people in like rural communities or people that are potentially further from healthcare or maybe not go to the doctor as often. And so I think that even just like this technology we have now is, yes, will be great on this level of cancer, but even just for people across the planet who might be impoverished or in some position where medical care is not readily available, that through our product or products similar, the entire playing field for people across the world will rise to the ability so that most people can have medical attention.
Yeah, and I mean, at least to a degree, I'm moderately obsessed with the concept of a bridge.
Right.
It's building a bridge between the person who needs help and the resources that can apply help.
Right.
And whether that is a short bridge, because you're having a
Mhm.
mental health crisis and you're struggling and you can't get with your therapist or you can't talk to your friends and you gotta pull something out and have a conversation with it. It's like you've got an app on your phone that's actually going to be intuitive and pay attention to what you're doing and not just keep repeating that it can't answer those questions, even though they're very hard questions.
Yeah.
Or it's a very long bridge. You are an impoverished person, which admittedly presents a challenge. Like, how do we get information to those people? Like, oh, they don't have a cell phone, so we got to
Mhm.
find better ways to solve that
Which
problem.
we have also discussed solutions into bringing things offline,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, and
AI
that
models and things
yeah.
like that, and healthcare tools that will work without the use of internet, so that they can be used in these like places that may not have access to a cell phone or internet.
Yeah, and it's that when you work on making things smaller instead
Mhm.
of making them bigger, they are
Mhm.
easier to move around. It's
Right.
just kind of physics. So if you don't need a model that is running in that particular moment on 100,000 GPUs in 10 data centers across most of the
Yeah.
United States, and you can put it on a phone or a laptop or even just a portable PC, just a standard PC case, you just plug into a little generator and take it somewhere, then as you start scaling down, you make it available to more and more people, and
Yeah.
easier to have. I mean, my vision, that you and I have talked about quite a bit is, you build a PC that just plugs into the wall and runs by itself, and you can stick that in the middle of a remote village somewhere that has power,
Mhm.
admittedly,
Whether it be solar or, you know,
yeah, there's got to be a baseline to it somewhere, that could then bring information and bring answers to individuals in that space, where they could, hey, let's go up to this kiosk and have a
Mhm.
conversation and get that answer, about how I'm feeling or how my child is feeling or what's going
Right.
on. There is definitely a cultural line where parties would be afraid of that for the lack of understanding of technology, and we would have a very difficult time going into certain cultures and saying, hey, you want to talk to this computer,
Mhm.
but that is a process, which goes back to the original part of the conversation with, we're not trying to do this overnight. We're trying to
Mhm.
build an infrastructure that's actually going to help people over the longer term.
Wow.
And some cultures aren't going to want the help.
No.
They're gonna
That's
want to be
true.
separated. They're gonna want to. I've been recently doing some research into the Hmong culture in Central California and how they think about the illness that affects their body, and certain illnesses are looked at as blessings, as benefits, to them, and so they don't want to treat that. And I you have to respect those cultural lines, but the way that I believe you should do that is just make the technology available, and
Yeah.
then leave the choice to the person who can consume it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you just storm into some village somewhere and plug something in and set up a solar panel and do all this, because that starts to sound an awful lot like an invasion instead of
Yeah.
actually
Or
delivering
Starlink.
the service, right? But just like any other type of missionary that would have
Mhm.
to go out and present information on religion, we would present information on the availability of a resource. And
Right.
do you want to choose this? Is this something you want to explore?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, let's take a look at it. That might be cool. Or
Yeah.
get the hell out of here. We're going to go talk to the witch doctor. Cool, man. It's your choice. It's your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the choice being within the user is always important, right? Like, we can't force anything upon
Right.
anyone. We don't want to force anything upon anyone.
No.
All we want to do is make health available, if so chosen, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that, and we have seen across the world in other technologies that it is readily accepted in many different places, right? And so this could just be another wave of that, or if not, if they don't want it, that's fine as well. But segueing a little bit, earlier you mentioned data and how many
Mhm.
data points were involved with the human body, right? And human
Mhm.
being and the human existence, let's say. And so I think that this is an interesting topic with some of the things that have been happening lately with like TikTok, right?
Right.
And so, A, could you maybe shed some light on the whole cybersecurity data side of this situation? And then B, maybe elaborate on how AI basically keeps your data secure in a medical sense, and then how we make sure things are secure here at Clarify, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the TikTok thing's actually a rather interesting thought problem. If you divorce yourself from the dopamine addiction that's generated by
Well,
doing
I feel like if anyone is to be asked, it's you,
yeah.
because not only do you come from like a software side and a cybersecurity side, but also have a very broad, high level perspective on large major events or major events, I should say.
Yeah.
And so I think that I kind of saved this question for now, just because we had kind of talked about it a little bit off camera, but I really wanted to hear your perspective on the things and how they relate to AI and cybersecurity and data as a whole, right?
So it's a large topic because data is powerful. And anything that's powerful can be used dangerously. So,
Right.
and that's a lot of people are, oh, data is like oil. Data is not like oil. Data is more like uranium. It's like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
you can by itself, it's already doing things. It's existing. It's just spraying off active particles. But you start doing things with it, and it gets really powerful. It gets really dangerous. You enrich it and you use it in bombs, and we will blow up entire cities. Or
uranium, not data.
yeah, you can't. Well, I mean,
Well,
well,
I mean, maybe, who
I
knows?
don't think data could do it by itself. Uranium
Yeah,
could.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you need to put things with it. So, I mean, we could beat this analogy to
I
death.
mean,
But
ICBMs, they use tracking data. Who knows?
right, stop. But so the power that is inherent in data comes from its mass.
Right.
So there's by itself as one piece of data is nothing. Looking at the data hierarchy, data is just ones and zeros. It's just a
Mhm.
bunch of stuff, ones points that exist on some type of storage medium. And then when we take it a step further and we enrich that data with some level of context, we bring it together and we make it human consumable, you have information. And
Yeah.
that information can do a variety of things. That's when you start actually moving from the resource into the powerful phase. You enrich that information further, with additional context and additional pieces of information coming together, and you've got knowledge, and that is where data becomes truly capable. Is you can actually do things with that. You can act on that and make decisions that will impact large or small scales of people. You take knowledge and combine it and enrich it further, and that becomes wisdom and strategy and direction, and what you can do with all of these pieces of knowledge. So when I'm saying data, and a lot of the scientists in the space are saying data, they are referring to those individual pieces of information that exist in storage and have not been enriched yet. And when we're saying information, we're referring to this enriched pieces of data that can then come together and allow people to understand what those pieces of data mean. And then you start dealing with knowledge capital and all this other crap when you start working your way uphill and you get more and more pieces of information together. So essentially, you're just chunking things, as
Mhm.
you work uphill into pieces that can actually be worked on. So that the relevance to that, to what you were talking about, kind of goes into the TikTok space. Um, your phone, your mobile device, whatever it is, whether it's an Android or it's an iPhone or it's a Nokia, although some of the old Nokias aren't doing anything, but I think you could probably kill someone with some of the original Nokias because you did it so
There's the
well.
brick.
Right.
Yes.
But whatever your mobile device is, or that extensive device at this point is a laptop or desktop, and in the case of TikTok, it's mostly the phone, is collecting data about you. whether it's where it's sitting, at that particular point, if it's on or off, if you've swiped on it, if you've looked at it, if depending on the devices that are associated with it, it's collecting all of that information. And that information then goes into a data store somewhere. Depending on who owns the brand or what app it is, and what they can reach in the phone, there's a lot of different layers of protection that are built around that. That data becomes available either to the app developer or to the device owner, which in Apple or Android most of the time, or Samsung. And that information then, or that data then gets compiled into information that can start to be used to build a profile about the person that's using it. Now, that profile at that point is not particularly tied to you.
Right.
So it's not, they don't know that it's Matt's phone. They don't know that it's Shane's phone. They know that it's user giant, number of characters. But looking at that information as a whole, you've got knowledge. So people that own the phone in this particular part of the world are looking at TikTok this much of the time, and they're looking at these particular views and da 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 da. Now that's two different branches of that information, but a lot of organizations, TikTok in particular, can shuffle that together and create a pretty good digital profile of who's looking at their content and what they're doing. Now, we've all heard of the algorithms that drive all of this data that's presented to us, all the content that we actually see. That is being curated with variables based on how you're reacting to content that you're seeing. If you don't swipe on it for a few seconds, that gets a little more weight. If you like it, it gets a little more weight. If you swipe really quick, it gets less weight. If you watch it again, if you tag it, all of these different functions are collecting your preferences and building that profile further. So where AI steps into this is AI is really good at filling in blanks. It's really good at it. That's what we want it to do. Back to our original conversation about predicting cancer earlier, the way that it can predict those things is it looks at the current condition and it says, well, if these 5 things changed, it's going to look like this. So I'm going to fill in all kinds of blanks. AI can do that not with 5 things, but with 1 billion things.
Oh, wow.
So you can have hundreds of thousands of parameters, and it will run these scenarios over and over again to come up with some viable predictions. And then you start adding more weights in there, and you reduce the number of unknowns so that it gets better at predicting outcomes. That's the way that the algorithm works on TikTok, to show you more of what you want to see. But this backfires mightily if you look at one thing too long. I've manipulated these algorithms for years. At one point on TikTok, playing with it, all I was seeing was information on helicopter flight schools. Because I intentionally tried to push that, to narrow that algorithm to where that's all it was.
Right.
And breaking out of that algorithm to see other things, I couldn't do very easily until there was something that had been driven harder in the algorithm, which is usually by paid advertisement.
Right.
That you're feeding into the algorithm further. Why is this scary? Well, it's scary for one particular reason. You get enough of that profile information together and you fill in enough of those blanks, and you can guess who the person is. And you can do a really good job of that. So you can actually figure out, this is Matt looking at this TikTok, even if it's this 8-digit, 16, 32-digit character that identifies me. The AI can de-identify or rather re-identify the information that has been de-identified. And it's a pretty good guess. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Right. But then when you start shuffling in other pieces of information, that are in there, eventually it becomes really, really good. And you've created an entire digital profile about a person that can be used to effectively predict how they're going to act in a particular situation. Like, if they were approached by a Chinese operative and given $1 million, would they share state secrets? So this is the fear that is driving the United States government to make decisions about data collecting apps. Why they targeted TikTok? Honestly, I don't know. Theoretically, it's, if government officials are using it and you're worried about them sharing state information, just tell them not to use it.
Yeah.
Be like, you're not allowed to use TikTok, which is a lot of other countries do.
Something I think interesting there is just like, it seems almost like either A, don't use TikTok, or B, it seems like, I mean, after the Patriot Act, it seems like we're all monitored anyway. And it seems like if you work in a place where you have access to these state secrets, whether you have like a top secret clearance or a classified clearance. These things are already highly monitored, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it does make sense coming from this perspective of, maybe, foreign adversaries, coming from a perspective or a lens, less so of cybersecurity, more so of national security, and saying, okay, we have these people and they're building profiles on our intelligence, and then finding our weakest links, right? And this could be a potential hazard for state secrets or, national security, these things. It makes sense. I guess where it comes in for me is just going, like you said, why TikTok of all things? It seems to me it goes, every company, American, Chinese, whatever, collects data and builds profiles. That's how social media works. That's how they provide you with content, right? And so to me, it seems like there's some sort of underlying reason as for TikTok, which we don't have to get into. It's not really political or anything like that. It's just not
there
really.
is a lot of decision making going on behind that I'm not privy to, and a lot of other people aren't privy to. And I mean, we can make some pretty easy assumptions,
Right.
because there's a lot of anti-China sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
So China is hoovering up all of this information and creating profiles because it's going to create a very powerful information position over the next decade. Okay, it's you're right in what you're saying, in that there's a jillion other companies that are collecting this information and building digital profiles. The most notorious profile generator on the entire planet is Amazon.
Oh yeah.
There's zero question that they have more data on most humans than exists. And
I mean, as far as I know, is from everything from what I want to shop through Amazon Prime, what I want to watch, Amazon Video, what games I like to play through Amazon Gaming and Twitch. They basically know everything. Alexa, they hear everything I say, and so I guess it's kind of weird. Like, is it because they're an American company that they're maybe protected, or I guess that's, again, kind of outside our scope, and we can only really guess. But it does seem interesting to this. It doesn't seem to be a data problem or data concern as more so who has the data.
It's not really. I mean, it's old, new boss, same as the old boss.
Right.
The whole point of the information apparatus that exists across everything, whether it's a national security level or it's an individual marketing level, is protect what you need to protect and realize that everything else is going to get had. Like, it's just kind of the way it works. And it's always worked that way. There's a social hiding mentality that exists, when you're walking through town. You don't want people to know what you're doing. It creates this weird stigma. You're like, no, don't look at me. But all the neighbors look at you and then they stop giving a shit.
Right.
It's like, oh, look, here's Joe Schmo walking down the street. He's wearing a weird pair of shoes today. And then 15 seconds later, they don't remember Joe Schmo walking down the street. So there's a level of impact that exists, that how important are you? How important is the information you have access to? But in the information war that has gone on forever and is still going on, the people are always the weakest link. Always. Humans are always the weakest link. That's the cybersecurity 101. That's why phishing is so prevalent. That's why everybody's getting text messages from some toll provider or another that says, click here because you have a toll you have to pay. So they can install a rootkit on your phone and own all of your information and then get 0.7 Bitcoin, in hostage money. So that people are always the weakest link. So if you build a really good profile around a person, you can manipulate them. So there's a real fear around that is legitimate and founded for people that are in highly sensitive or highly specialized spaces. And the easiest way to get a highly sensitive or specialized individual is to just hoover up everybody's everything.
Right.
Just get every damn everything. Just suck it all in, and then let AI sort it out and build better algorithms to build all of this stuff once you have this giant treasure chest of all of the data, all that you can get all over the damn world. So is it scary for you, for Joe Schmo over here, to be looking at TikTok and getting all your data sucked up? Not really.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And you're not doing anything.
I think that's what most people care about. Is it actually matter to me? Right.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to our first part of our conversation. Does it make any difference in my life? Is it solving any of my problems? And I have a whole separate issue about, dopamine addiction and and swiping too much. But that's my psychology brain screaming at me like we're fucking up our brains doing this kind of stuff. But the reality is that that's not my choice. Like, that's my
Right.
opinion. You know, everybody is allowed to exercise their own choices, as it should be, in those spaces. And by actively preventing a public tool, the government has made a decision to do an equally broad stroke and say, you're not allowed to use this because we're afraid that some people are going to use it that shouldn't, and there's going to be these circumstances. One of the things that we push hard for in cybersecurity is the impact versus probability ratio. So
Right.
what is the impact of this and what is the probability that's going to happen? If you have two highs, that is a very critical risk, and you have to be very worried about it. If you have two lows, who gives a shit?
Right.
Like, it's almost never going to happen, and even if it does, it's not really going to do anything. So the risk ratio of that doesn't seem like it was weighed for this type of TikTok event. It doesn't seem like there was a lot of thought around that, because the harvesting of data, as you've said, coming back to our original point, happens.
Mhm.
It happens all the time. It's happening now. Everybody is watching this video. Everybody is listening to the podcast. It's happening. All of the waving my hand.
YouTube, Spotify, they're all collecting the data.
It's happening now. The risk portion of that is what's the probability? 152%. It is absolutely happening without question. What is the impact like that? Like,
very low.
That's small. What's it going to do?
Nothing.
It's going to have some other fucking company is going to send me an email out of the blue and say, hey, you should really buy a super cool 3D printer because you have a bunch of 3D printed shit behind you.
Right.
Okay. Fuck off. I already have 3D printers.
Right.
So it's that risk is more annoyance than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But we're trying to legislate around all of that. And that's going to create a really uncomfortable environment if we think about legislating away problems instead of applying common sense, no nonsense solutions to solve some of those problems. And you don't shut off the fire hose at the end of the hose. You shut off at the fire hydrant. So if you don't want people to collect data about us, then we should stop presenting data.
Right.
We should stop putting it out there. But we live in a society where that is a very important commodity, going back to uranium, and can be very powerful. Fortunately for us, nobody's trying to do any crazy stuff with data. They're just trying to sell us 3D printers or better pairs of pants, which is annoying, but doesn't damage anybody, horribly.
Yeah. I guess to tie it all together and kind of wrap it up, how is data dealt with, and profiles, I should say, dealt with in Clarifi, in the Claire app, these types of things, and within companies similar to ours or products in a similar space, whether it be health or tech or AI, just in general, how can we ensure that our users especially feel safe or comfortable knowing that data is ultimately collected, or maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that data is inherently collected through basically everything you do. But how can they be assured that, especially because their medical data is being used, or these types of things, or they're presenting things that could be confidential, or these types of things where it is potentially the risk is high, right? Like we said, that it's a low probability, low risk, where if medical data has a problem, that's pretty high risk. And so how do we ensure that people are secure and feel safe within using our product specifically?
So there are a lot of organizations that are doing similar things to what we're doing. So I'll start out, it's not just us. Like we're following really good protocols and structures when we're doing all of this that have been tested and vetted over a very long time. So we haven't really invented anything in this space. We're just doing it better than a lot of other people do.
And of course, we do have like the things that people like to hear, like we are HIPAA compliant. These
right. And
like,
that's where I was going. That's one of the big spaces that my fidget just fell on the floor. That's one of the big spaces that we're focused on, is the sensitive data space.
Right.
Clarifi's got a very long-term vision, to work in those sensitive data spaces and work in highly secure spaces and help bring AI and technology into those spaces, because they're scary. So they're difficult to work in. So yes, I keep biting off more and more than I can chew, which is my story of my life.
It's kind of the Clarifi way nowadays.
It really is. That's why the motto is solving the unsolvable, because we find stuff that's absolutely horrifying and then say, all right, let's work on this. This is great.
You have to kind of jump in the deep end if you want to make a splash, right?
Oh, yeah. And we're doing a damn cannonball. one of the focuses is not just how we are protecting the data to the regulatory standard. Yeah, we're HIPAA compliant. Yeah, all of the financial data that's collected is PCI DSS compliant. Yeah, we're doing all of this work. We've met SOX. We're doing our SOC 2 analysis. Like, we're doing all of these things to check the box, which is very important, because that we want to demonstrate that we are able to control the data and keep it from people who are not supposed to see it.
Yeah.
But we're taking that a step further. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know anything about any of our customers. I don't want to know anything about
nobody in the company either wants to or should be able to in any capacity, right?
Right. So during our test phase, when we're in alpha and beta and we're testing, then the directors and the engineers can actually see the data, which is why we filter out all of the really important personal data. Right. So we're looking at test data. Everything's fake. We have anonymized medical record sets and things like that. And we have simulated conversations. So we're not actually looking at anybody's real information. When we go to public beta, we're actually using the tool that I'm about to describe that prevents us from being able to see anything, which is a common tool in a lot of high security database work. So when we're actually collecting data from humans that are actually out there doing things, we can't see any of it without the permission of the people that we're talking to. So
if someone discloses permission, their like doctor could see it, right?
Exactly.
Or some like with their permission, who needs to see it can see it, right?
Or even us to a degree. So if somebody, calls us up on the phone or gets on the email and says, "Man, I was talking to Claire and she said some crazy shit. I don't know what she's even talking about." All right, well, let's go back. Can we look at your record? Yes, you can look at my record for 24, 48, 72, 1 month, whatever.
But with explicit permission. That's the important thing, right?
They have the token that allows us to get access. So we have to ping their device or some other method for them to authorize that.
So it is literally like they have to click on their phone to give us permission to help them with their
which is a common protection that is in the financial industry right now. Right. You can't see my bank accounts. If I call customer service and say, "I need help, I have this transaction that I'm screwed up about," the first thing that the agent will say is, "I'm going to send you a ping to your phone. You have to say you're talking to an agent, and then it has to approve it." We take that a step further. So not only can we never see any of that, but if that permission ever gets asked, then the user gets notified.
Right. So not only are we legally compliant, right? The government has audited us and been like, these guys are up to snuff.
Yes.
But also we have internal controls that protect the data. And then if on top of that, if for some reason something happens and we need to see it and we need to help someone, then they have the final say and they let us in. Okay.
And that's one of the things that is I don't want to say pushing very hard, but we're trying to really campaign is the way that this data should be collected. If I was approached by a government agency and they said, "We have a warrant.
Right.
We need to see this person's data. Do you have this person's data?" Yes. I can tell who the person is, which takes away some of what we're talking about with the actual IDs. I can assign that to a person and actually figure that out. Great. We need you to give us all the data. Sure, here you go. And they'll look at that data and say, "We need you to decrypt it." I can't do that. You can't.
So the data on top of that is also encrypted?
Yes. Okay. And the encryption key belongs to the user.
So basically, even if like we were not audited, but the government came to us and was like, "Give us everything," we could give them what we have, but they couldn't use it.
They can't use it.
Okay.
Now there's a really like abstract future fear in here that I have to talk about. Like, if you have a quantum level computer that can crack encryption like that, you can see whatever the hell you want. Like, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, but at that point, the entire world is kind of on fire, right?
Right. So, and that's what I'm trying to say is that nothing is foolproof. Technology continues to evolve, but if those computers are readily available and you could crack through that level of encryption, we would find another way, because I don't want to know about you. I don't want to know about our customers. I don't want to know what you ate.
We have enough problems already.
Right. Yeah. I got enough to worry about with me and my kids and my wife. I don't want to know about I don't want to know about your problems or your kids or your wife. Forget it. I don't want to hear about it. So it's that your life is your life. So Claire, our AI system, can read that data and interact with it and scan it, because but none of that data is ever presented back to us. So we can't read it or see it. So she's finding those insights in your data, and she's reading through it and seeing new information that's coming in and creating those pieces. So she has all this data in front of her, and she sees pieces of information that come in. Oh, I ate this that day, or oh, I did this workout, or oh, I'm feeling like this. And that starts to build out this human profile that is really valuable to the customer. And what we will draw from that, and what Claire can draw from that, is anonymous metadata, anonymous trend information. So we have 750,000 people that are between the ages of 32 and 35 that live in this particular geographic space. There is zero way for us to actually drill into that data currently, to drill into that data and de-anonymize that information and actually figure out who's who.
But that's also important though, because then we can also see trends in potential like diseases, right? So it's like, say something happens, and say the tap water in Flint, Michigan goes bad, and all of a sudden people are getting sick. We can see that potentially before even the government steps in, right? And so these things are heavily encrypted and heavily protected, but some of this data is actually very helpful.
Well, it's important, not just, Flint is a great example, and so is COVID.
Right.
When COVID first landed and we started to see the spread, we could have tracked a lot of that information. Now, this is a very big brothery conversation. It's like we're looking down on all of this stuff. And then there's the ethical, like how much should we track and how much should we do, and what should we see, but do you want to help people or not? Do you want to? You don't have to be part of it, but there is a critical mass of people that are choosing to be part of that data apparatus, especially when it's protecting individuals and creating this mass of data that can then be operated upon. Now, and obviously this data presents a tremendous value, and people are going to want to buy it and use it, but I don't care. I mean, it's not, what is important is how I would feel in that circumstance. I don't want everybody and their brother reading about my medical history, but I do want advanced technology looking at it and trying to answer questions for me so that I can save my life and those I care about. So there's a little bit of balance to be struck. And I like to think that balance sits right in the middle, which is where we're trying to aim and land.
So somewhere between a truly tailored experience with Claire, the AI, who knows you and knows your data because she is for you, right? Or for the user, and so she knows about you, obviously, but there is a complete disconnect between Claire, the AI, and the actual company and the human beings behind Claire, who will never, ever know anything about you and will never have the ability to know anything about you or your medical data, right?
Right, and the information that's generated from Claire is privy to only the user and whoever the user decides to share with. And sometimes that user, actually a lot of time, that user is going to be a physician, who's going to have a practice. Claire also has professional tools, and we're working on some other projects associated with that will allow the interaction with patients and streamline physician processes, and not just physicians, but nurses and technical specialists, and even just a billing specialist. Like, how can I find my ICD-10 codes, things like that.
Right.
But that information is then compartmentalized and stored in different pieces so that the patient releases this information, and the responsibility then shifts to the medical establishment to protect that information under their HIPAA guidelines and the people that are allowed to see it. And we have a system that interacts with most EMRs that will allow those permissions the way they're structured. But there is a level of personal information that will never leave the patient's space, which, at the risk of taking this a little bit too far down a rabbit hole, if an individual is doing something that is frowned upon or illegal, if I'm underage and I'm drinking, if I am a habitual cocaine user, and I want feedback on how that's affecting me medically, who do you ask?
Right.
You're asking your friends, you're doing the occasional Google search, but that is a very out of context information resource. And when you go to your physician, you're either embarrassed or worried about it. You're like, man, I did like 4 lines of cocaine in the last 2 days. I don't know, train wreck. Your physician's going to be like, whoa, man.
Yeah.
Like, but if you ask Claire, there's not going to be any judgment. There's nothing associated with that.
No mandated reporters, nothing like that.
Yeah, nothing. No.
Pure information.
Yeah. There is some gray area in the mandatory reporting associated with self-harm.
Right.
So Claire will raise an alert, if somebody is, I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
You know, and that alert will then move back to the user and say, you've raised a mandatory alert. If you keep doing this, we're going to have to alert authorities.
Right.
And if you were just saying something, then we'll let it go. This is an area where we're actually trying to get involved in the compliance space as well, because it's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of vernacular and things like that where, oh, I'm going to kill myself. You know, oh, this is going to kill me today. Where the AI is going to take that absolutely seriously.
Right.
And
Right.
you're just trying to talk shit. Like, you don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
And then, is that a mandatory reporting event? Is there things associated with that? But that is the only space so far where we've seen a level of requirement associated with that. And all we do is just pass that permission back. Like,
Right.
is this something that we should report or that we should talk about? Which, once again, ethically puts us in a really weird situation. If you've got someone who says, no, don't tell anyone, and they actually harm themselves, then where is the responsibility for us as a company and ethical humans lie?
Right.
So that is a conversation that I would encourage people to have, not just amongst yourself, but with us.
Right.
Send some replies, send some emails.
Talk in the
Like, where do you
comments.
sit? Yeah. Put as many comments as you want, because
Yeah.
this is an issue that we don't think should be quiet, that we don't think should be stigmatized. You know, there is a mental health challenge existing throughout most of the world right now, with a lot of the strain that's going on between wars and political shifts. So people are suffering and they want to talk to someone. If they want to talk to a machine and they're worried about saying something and that machine's going to get them in trouble, how do we handle that? What do we do
Right.
as good humans?
So it looks like obviously we have some challenges ahead, right, with these different things. But just to sum it up, this last little conversation before we end, basically, information is highly secure. The only things that could potentially ever be reported or anything like that are all encrypted and or legally required, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some sort of like the government will be very angry at us if we don't do this, right? And as in fines and pulling our business license, things like that. And then also the last step is, or the last thing is, everything or the buck stops with you, right? And so if any information of any sort at any point is going to be shared that is actually able to be interpreted, the last okay comes from the user.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, just to wrap it up, thanks guys for listening. This is episode 2 of Clarify Everything with Matt and Shane. It has been a pleasure. As always, drop your questions in the comments. We should do like an email or something like that soon, so that we can just you can email in our questions and we can talk about them on the show. That should hopefully come in the next couple episodes. So stay tuned with that. Thanks, guys.